Yeah, this interview I thought was pretty amazing. Harada essentially grilled with like the lead producer of Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, talking and trying to do his best. I'm gonna break this down and sum it up for you guys. Harada was doing his best in this interview to sort of like get this guy to break information publicly, which he doesn't technically do. Here's the ultimate summary. Harada is one of the biggest Virtua Fighter weebs ever. Weird considering that he's like been one of the primary Tekken heads for a very long time, up until even as of late where he sort of passed on that responsibility. So Harada loves Virtua Fighter because he always felt that Virtua Fighter was a direct competition to Tekken, where a lot of things that ended up being in VF ended up showing up in Tekken like a year or two later in terms of like new and substantial sort of like game-changing things that Virtua Fighter was kind of doing. Tekken would sort of adopt that and sometimes do it better and sometimes not do it as good. However, it's clear that the Tekken team has always looked to Sega in terms of the Virtua Fighter series as being substantially influenced by. Harada wants Virtua Fighter to come back is what he's saying. He's willing to like brute force his way into making Virtua Fighter come back in some way, which is what he sort of grills this guy about. And what he's trying to do is get the information from this producer that how many people downloaded this thing, right? Even though the game was free, even though Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown was free, the amount of people that showed interest, if not even tried it on that first month or first couple of months, is really important. Like that's actually a very good tell of how many people actually care about VF, right? How many people could be introduced to it? How many people could actually enjoy it for the first time? Yada, 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 you know? So Harada wants Virtua Fighter to succeed as much as his own games, which is funny. And it's pretty clear that these guys already have like a relationship. And long story short, this entire part of the interview, there's a two-parter. This part of the interview is just a setup. I swear they planned this. They literally like planned it that, oh, I'm gonna grill you this entire time about the sales and expectations, everything that we want to know about how well did the new VF do it even in that first month. And Sega just didn't want to say anything. They were super hands off. Harada wanted to get some of that information out. He wanted to know how popular it was, how many people downloaded. And essentially there was a moment in this video where they practically reveal in the first like less than 60 days of the game being downloadable, how popular it was. And it's actually pretty surprising here. There's a very specific reason the producer is wearing this shirt. You see how the shirt says 800 on it? It's like a big golden 800 number. At some point in this video, they highlight that topic. Your shirt, what does your shirt mean? Because in Japan, the term 800 doesn't translate to like 800,000, right? Where it's like, oh, maybe it got 800,000 downloads. No. In Japan, 800 technically would mean like potentially 8 million, even around this time frame, which was, geez, man, when did they make this interview? This was July 10th. The game had only been out for like a month. No kidding. The downloads were only a month, and this dude was saying that they were very surprised that that many people were interested in the game. Another summary, this pretty much means that they eclipsed over 8 million downloads in just a month. And even the stuff that he was saying that the people that are monetizing, the people that are actually investing and buying costumes was way higher than they were expecting. And we all remember Virtua Fighter was free. If you had PlayStation Plus, it was essentially free. So 8 million downloads in a month, regardless if a game is free or not, is a big deal. That's a lot of interest suddenly and rapidly, and that's a lot of people paying attention to the game. Granted, the game is still not free of issues. We all know what happened to the netcode of the game, their attempts to sort of mitigate delay-based netcode. And the nice part is that Sega was kind of aware of all that stuff. But even with that being said, still a lot of people that were paying attention. So that's my summary. This happened many months ago. This was like almost 6 months ago now. Recently, from Dengeki, which is a very big news resource in Japan, they talk about the esports / Ultimate Showdown 6 months after release, their goals with the release, the post-launch support, and the broader future plans for the series. And I just kind of wanted to dissect all of this stuff, because it's pretty important. There's no people left to play with. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're not talking about filling seats at an esports stadium. We're not talking about that. The reason you can't find anyone to play with is because the netcode sucks. Number two, that many people showing interest doesn't matter if they're still playing. The hope behind all of this is that this game was essentially a testing ground, similar to like Darkstalkers Resurrection, to allow the developers to get an idea of who still gives a shit about VF. Can we spend barely any money on like a remaster of a game to ultimately find out, oh, would this even be worth our time if we wanted to make a VF6? You know? Long story short, bitches showed up. It just showed up hard. Let's go down a little bit. They were thinking of Virtua Fighter US as a one and done release. During the development, they came up with more stuff that they wanted to implement, so they started planning for post-launch, and then they came out to a huge response and wanted to meet requests for adding all the old items, translucent walls, etc., which is a part of a big update that just happened. Many of the updates have been for things that they weren't able to include in launch due to mandate and having to get the game out for Sega's 60th anniversary, but they feel like they're in a good position to directly respond to feedback. And he doesn't mention them publicly, but he does watch a lot of streams, and the dev team has a big monitor dedicated to new replays, which is that system the game actually has. And they're fielding a lot of inquiries about tournaments from individuals, esports, and everything like that. Because it's pretty clear that Virtua Fighter has always been a big stink in Japan. Japan's been like the primary place VF has always performed really well. And now, you know, it is what it is. It points out how the translucent walls weren't exactly arcade perfect, and they plan to get them 1-to-1 due to the different engine and hardware, which is always going to cause some differences. So they prioritize comfortability when setting on the look, and they also had some issues with the PS4/Pro version of the game. So on launching the PS Plus version, Virtua Fighter had been gone for so long that there were many people who had never played or never heard of it. They wanted the new Virtua Fighter to be as accessible as possible, and they were inspired by the Puyo Puyo esport game, which launched for a small amount, like 500 yen. Those discussions with Sony were offered as a free launch with PlayStation Plus, and they took it. This game was meant to be a promotional tool. They actually specifically say it. This was meant to be a promotional tool for reviving the series, and sales was not the goal. So managing a project that wasn't directly predicated on the profitability was a new and difficult experience. There was a really good reason why I was telling absolutely everybody, like, I'm getting some big vibes from this, that they're bringing this back in some way. They very easily could have just stuck Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown and just been like, here's a new version of the game that's essentially just the old version of the game. Have fun, right? But now it's in 4K. They didn't do that. They spent a little bit of money, right? They did put it in a new engine. They did give new character models. They aren't the most, it's not a PS5 version of the game, but effort was made. And with that kind of effort in that way, immediately my brain is like, oh, we've seen so many fighting games developers do this before. They are 100% surveying the market if this stuff can be something that they should invest in the future. They're 100% doing that stuff. So the testing of the waters worked out. And I have to say, thank you. Like, no kidding. I actually have to give a huge thanks to everybody that tried out Virtua Fighter, that downloaded it, gave it a shot, bought costumes, anything like that. Because one of the things that this game needed to do was just to get to the eyes and ears of people, just to give it a shot. So I have to say a big thanks to everybody that watched my videos, watched my streams, anything like that, and just wanted to give the game a fair shot and just press some buttons in some way. That means a ton. You might have actually made a substantial difference. Maybe not millions of downloads, but word of mouth does a lot. And the virality that comes with word of mouth of just trying a fighting game and liking it and being like, damn, this game is cool, that had an effect. It definitely has had an effect going forward. And I'm telling you right now, we were right. It might actually affect the future of Virtua Fighter, which is amazing. The retention rate has been high in Japan, and they have a lot of players still in all other regions. Download numbers were way higher than expected. And they're a little miffed that Sony's forecast numbers, which the team thought was too optimistic, was actually pretty close. So Sony had a better idea of what it would actually be downloadable as. So they're happy it exceeded expectations, and reviving the series at this point is not easy. But given how long it took them to produce anything new for Virtua Fighter, which has been pretty much 10 years, 10 plus years actually, it's more than expected and better results that this game demonstrated that there is interest, and now they're tasked with reacting to that demand. Like, literally, this is good. They are now tasked with reacting to that demand So regarding sales figures, there have only been preliminary sales for the recent Yakuza collaboration DLC that came out a few weeks ago, but the series of the main game player base, etc., is more and less lines with expectations. On the Yakuza collab, they determined costumes for each character based on fighting style, and yada yada yada. They pretty much go over which characters got which Yakuza costumes and why. And the 60th anniversary ended up being a catalyst to finally get a new VF project off the ground. So this was like the Sega 60th anniversary. They were celebrating all their older games. And it intersected with these esports plans, hence esports in the title. Moving along, like where the audience is, how it sort of came from arcades, how they have to move away from the arcade environment because of pandemic reasons. Fighting games are different now than they were a couple years ago. If the percentage of veteran/legacy players is low, then the game's naturally going to be turned or tuned for newcomers and vice versa. Ideally, you want a constant influx of newcomers who gradually become veterans. On whether they thought about changing the balance for the game, they simply didn't have the time. The game had to be out June 1st, and the project started in March of 2020. So they literally spent a little bit over a year, right? Like a year and like 3 months to even begin the project, right? So that means that an actual making of the game, and that was right as COVID started, so they were even knocked back because of that. They put this together really fast. On a Steam version, he says that they have a lot of requests for it and are considering it. The arcade version is PC-based, so it's technically possible. The issue is that going multi-platform means they need to start thinking about crossplay, which would require them to develop an entire platform-agnostic infrastructure that ensures no added lag or disparities. The only reason this is, they're saying this, where it's like, well, everyone else does crossplay, why don't you do it? Is that Sega has so little experience with crossplay outside of probably Phantasy Star Online 2. And Phantasy Star Online 2 is its own thing, right? You can't be like, oh, just drop the crossplay functionality from PSO2 in here. No. Like, that is much different than what fighting game 1v1 host-based sort of latency requirement is. It's a very, very different situation. So he's not lying, right? The problem with Japanese developers and a lot of these things is that they sort of just stick to their guns, that what has worked in the past, and now they're being presented with a situation where no, you can't have fighting games have shitty online. It just sucks. And yeah, Virtua Fighter 5's Ultimate Showdown did not satisfy. Like, it's netcode. They tried to do something, but it still ran into the exact same problems that delay-based netcode has. It's good to see them like aware, right? Like, okay, we are aware that crossplay would be a big deal, which makes me think they would not want to do it here. They would want to do it someplace else, right? They might want to do it in a later game. The big deal from this is that the Virtua Fighter devs are aware of what's going on. They are very much tasked with, at this point, to respond to the success that Virtua Fighter 5 Esports / Ultimate Showdown got. That's some really good news. It means that all the effort that people put into trying to download it or give the game a shot is absolutely doing its thing, which is awesome. So, with that being said, I have some personal hopes. Here's the big deal. Here's the gimmick with the Virtua Fighter series, the problem with VF, which ultimately led it to being like dormant for practically 15 years. The issue is that Sega has always approached Virtua Fighter as a landmark, groundbreaking series. They've always thought, since VF1, we need to do something super groundbreaking in every single Virtua Fighter game from this point forward, like emulating actual human combat in some way and putting that into a digital landscape. That so much now isn't that crazy, right? Like, fighting games are dramatically different than they were in 2005, 2006 when Virtua Fighter 5 first came out. The interesting thing is that if you go back, like, VF1 was about the utilization of 3D graphics and, you know, characters in combat. VF2 was largely like textured characters and crazy lighting. All the VFs are ridiculous tech demos. There's a lot of like fantastical stuff in VF, but not too fantastical. Like, they do have a ninja guy, but they really went for extremely fluid combat. And man, so much of VF5 Ultimate Showdown and so much of VF5 in general is just so gorgeous to look at when you really start paying attention to the game. And it's crazy to think that that game came out in like 2005, 2006. Sega, I got one for you. It might be hard at this point because so much time has gone in between Virtua Fighter 5 to Virtua Fighter 6. Listen, if you want to bring Virtua Fighter back and do something that is clearly like pioneering, if you want to do something that allows the fighting game genre to move forward the exact same way that it did with the previous iterations of the Virtua Fighter series, I'm going to give you one thing you absolutely could put your time, your money, and attention into. And it's netcode. If you can do something that utilizes all the recent efforts and opportunities that other fighting games have made, do not ignore what other fighting games have done, learn from them. Rollback netcode is one thing, but there are even better solutions that are showing up that are on top of rollback netcode that is making some pretty huge strides. I think the absolute biggest thing that Virtua Fighter needs to do is to bring people together globally, not regionally, globally. Allow everyone to play this game together in some way. That is a critical aspect for fighting games, like in general. That's the thing, that's all you want to do. You just want people to be able to play with each other from wherever, and also to play with each other on whatever. And I think the netcode thing goes right next to crossplay. I'm not even kidding you. I think crossplay as well as netcode is really important. And I think those should be the highest priority when it comes to a new Virtua Fighter, because I'm not really worried about them making the game look good. They clearly have the talent to make the game look good and play good, right? I'm sure they'll consolidate a lot of systems in a new Virtua Fighter, and it probably will be a much different game. But I think they're going to keep a lot of the stuff that makes Virtua Fighter great intact, and makes it different from a game like Tekken. Like, that's the big thing, is that people are like, how do you get a 3D fighting game different from Tekken? Just play VF and you'll understand. It's a much different kind of game. So I don't think that's going to go away. I think the stuff they can improve on is crossplay and netcode. The next one is a really, really big shot in the dark. And this is something that I personally have huge hopes for, that Sega will bite the bullet in a similar way that they did with this project. Sega, you guys have already proven that the free-to-play model for your games, or at least some of your games, has been profound. In fact, some of the biggest money-making abilities that your games have had have been from free-to-play stuff. Sega, for God's sake, make Virtua Fighter free-to-play. Do it. Monetize in the ways that Virtua Fighter set up for all these years. Virtua Fighter began like fighting game customization back in like VF4. It started a hell of a long time ago. The whole thing with VF is that it's been surrounded by customization and people being able to do whatever the heck they want to their character and unlock things, create season passes, season models, monetize in other ways. I don't care. Sell costumes, anything like that. Just get people into the game, get them playing the game with other people, and have it all work, and you will grow an audience. To me, Virtua Fighter has always been a series that feels like it's very hard to bring back. It's something that is sort of rooted in like the 90s and the early 2000s. And it might be like, I don't know if anybody's going to resonate with these characters anymore. Even Virtua Fighter 5 Ultimate Showdown, right? When it came out. But it was pretty clear that if the barrier of entry, if like there's no $20, $15, $10, $30, $60 barrier of entry, people will try shit out. And guess what? People show up. And they've even mentioned that a lot more people bought the DLC for the game, which was all the extra costumes and stuff, than they were ready for. Even if it's that, right? Even if it's something like that, allow it to be truly free to play, where you treat it like other online games that have free to play models, where you let everyone play the game completely for free. It's just if they want to spend money, if they want to customize their characters, if they want to buy new stages or classic models or anything like that, let people do so. And that's how you should make your money. And you should continually expand and update and add characters and yada, yada, yada. And guess what? Those characters should be free too. Your roster at the start should be free, and your expanding roster should also be free. There should just be a new character. Bam, new character. New character comes out. Here's some stuff you can get for them. Here's some stuff that we also unlock for the old characters too. That should be a thing. The PSO2 method, 100%. That's my personal hope that they do that with Virtua Fighter. That'll allow so many more people to play this game than ever before. That's my hopes. This is all incredible news, just hearing how much the game actually performed and did even more over the months that it had been out, that they were surprised and hit any of the metrics they had and more. That's insanely good news. And I think it's great news for the future. It's just that that future is going to be a long way out. I personally hope they hit a few of these notes and they truly hit the things that fighting games need right now, which is a global environment for Virtua Fighter to thrive in, and not just like a local one that is just Japan or US West or US East or UK or something like that. So that's my big hopes for VF in the future. And damn, it feels very good that somewhere in some way out there, Sega could potentially be planning and figuring out what they're doing with a Virtua Fighter 6, with a brand new Virtua Fighter game. And I'm all for it. And I hope it's fun as hell. I hope it's great.